Independent's voice. With a career spanning over 25 years and across 3 countries, John is the CEO of Professional Investment Services, Australia's largest independently owned network of financial advisors and accountants. Terry practices as a solicitor, an accountant and a financial planner. He is also the founder of Dover Financial, an independent dealer group with over 100 advisors. Rod is the Chief Executive of In Focus Group, an independent financial planning network of over 150 financial planners, represented in over 80 offices across Australia. Chair of the panel, Anne is the founder of Pinnacle Practice, an advisory firm that helps businesses stand out from the crowd, tell their story and be heard.
What an extraordinary time we're living through, are we not? It's just a moment in history. And, you know, the timing of today, Vanessa and Marcus, in terms of this event is just spectacular. So thank you. And, you know, there is a ridiculous amount of change and it's hard to keep up. And I talk to advisors day in, day out. And there's one thing, though, that hasn't changed. And that's many of them really do aspire to be licensed through an independently owned dealer group. And that's what we'll be talking about today with our panellists. We're in the FOFA world, and I guess, you know, question to the panel and, you know, whoever wants to start, with the new regulatory pressures, and they are pressures, how is it impacting independently owned dealer groups such as yourselves?
We at Dover found FOFA remarkably simple to comply with. I do confess to some amusement that others would say that they've spent millions of dollars complying with a set of rules which fundamentally requires them to put their clients' best interests first. That held no challenge for us to do that. It was quite simple, business as usual. And rules regarding full and complete disclosure of your fees to your clients, they've been part and parcel of the legal profession and the accounting profession for many years, and they're not difficult at all. The other aspect of FOFA was basically coordinating a change in remuneration model. Many financial planning practices, both inside and outside the independent zone, have been doing that very successfully for the last 2 years or so. They saw FOFA coming and they acted early. Not that hard, actually. All's good on the Dover front.
So BAU for Dover?
Yeah,
okay.
I think so.
All right, Rod's grinning. Any comments?
Yes, I'm grinning or grimacing, I'm not sure which. But no, look, I think the way that we viewed FOFA was as much opportunity as threat. And so I guess, you know, we sat back and had a look at how our business was structured and thought long and hard about the way that it should be structured in that post-FOFA environment. And what I mean by that is that, you know, I think what FOFA has done is force a lot of convergence of technologies that advisors were previously using as separate bits of technology in their business. So we've created integrated technology solutions that help the advice process from end to end. And of course what that does is take cost out of the back end of the business, so it streamlines the provision of advice. So that really helps with driving down that cost of advice in an environment that's undoubtedly, it does, if you say it quick it sounds simple, but undoubtedly it is a much more sophisticated environment from a professional standards perspective. At the front end of the business we thought about, okay, well what are ways that we can better engage with our advisor network and make sure that we were providing tools around building that true CVP so that, you know, the C word there shouldn't be forgotten, customer. It's about making sure that the customer's at the centre of everything that's done.
John, do you see the risks in this new world any different to what they were before?
Well, I think FOFA is in response to a bigger force of change, and that's really about consumerism, and the government was forced to respond to that through FOFA. And I think if you really put the consumer at the heart of what you're doing, then that's always going to make you compliant. It's always going to make you think about best interest. And I think that's really what goes to the heart of where I think the future of advice has to be, and particularly independence, is that independent quality advice. People desperately need that in Australia. It's a very complex world. And I think it's about how do we evolve our business model and into being able to support practices, deliver that on a consistent, reliable basis over an extended period of time. And that's a lot of change for a lot of practices because it does mean the introduction of probably a more IT-centric There is more of a consumer-centric, so much more education, communication, etc. Things that may or may not be in some of those practices today that we need to move across and get out there in a consistent form. Cheaply.
So, you know, if you look at FOFA and what your businesses have done differently, are there any takeouts? We've touched on technology, we've touched on fees. Terry's saying it's BAU, but for the audience and they're learning about adapting, what's your advice?
Well, I think in any market, and particularly one that's moving as fast as what this market is moving at the moment, staying the same is just not a viable option. And we're seeing that organisations who have failed to evolve are clearly exiting the industry in one form or another at the moment. So I think it is about how quickly can you change, how quickly can you get ahead of the curve, how quickly can you build a very sustainable, successful business model that's built around the clients and around the end consumer very, very quickly. And that's my lesson from the last sort of 4 months while I've been at Centrepoint.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. I think, I heard someone describe FOFA as a hygiene factor. And I find that quite funny because if you think about what that means, without hygiene you die as a rule. So, I'm not quite sure that a hygiene factor would be the way that I would describe it. I think that, what we've reflected on is that the way that risk and compliance frameworks need to operate within a smaller business need to be more sophisticated and more professional to make sure that you can deal with that rapidly changing environment. And that's where we've made a lot of investment from our side.
But many advisors wonder: are you more vulnerable or exposed being an independent as opposed to being behind the safe ship of an institution? Are the risks the same, no matter where you are now in the new operating environment, with best interest duty and the like?
Depending on whether you're a practice or a licensee, I'd much rather be in my shoes as a licensee today than any other organisation part of the value chain. I think we take all the risk, we get very little margin, so there's only upside for us going forward. And if we can get the model right, then there is margin there. It is a successful industry. It will continue to evolve. And I'd hate to be an institution at the moment having a big manufacturing base that isn't really client-centric, would be my sense. And the IT systems, to a large extent, aren't built around the customer either. They're legacy platforms that often were built 10, 20 years ago, and they've been maintained, updated, etc. They're legacy now. And I think if you really put the customer at the heart of what you're doing, you come up with a very different solution.
Terry, I know you've got some strong, passionate views on that subject matter.
Well, I was thinking of fresh then. I think being an independent's a lot more fun than what I suppose an institution would be, because you're not beholden to anyone and you've got no product orientation. You're allowed to get out there and do what's best for the clients and what's best for the advisors. And as a result, we encourage statements of advice which deal with things like opening up a business or buying a business as a form of investing. Businesses are the best investments. We've heard that today already. We recommend property. We recommend industry super funds. You've got a whole range of things out there that you can enjoy educating your clients about if you are free to do so. And that's the great thing about being an independent. You are independent.
Right? No?
Oh, look, I concur. I think when you see a rapid change emerge in any industry, let alone a financial services style industry, that it forces innovation. And I think it's one of the great advantages that we have sitting on this panel today is that we can rapidly absorb that information, very quickly analyse what its impact is and what the opportunities are for our businesses and respond. And I think that's the, when you're working in that big institutional environment, you don't have the luxury of being able to respond in that nimble and flexible way.
No, turning the Titanic. And so if you need to be nimble, you need to innovate, you need to adapt and change, have you changed your business models in terms of the value proposition that you're presenting to your current advisors and also maybe to prospect advisors that you're speaking with?
Well, I think coming back to a few of the points that have come through already, advisors generally want three primary things, and that's really a good income stream, a good profitable, valuable business when they go to exit, but also a relatively simple sort of model in the way they operate their business. And I think in terms of the proposition that at Centrepoint we're looking to offer through AAP and PIS is to really offer people very solid, robust solutions which make their lives easier in the way they conduct their business, give them the tools that they need to be able to do quality advice, give them access to the product range that they would want to offer to their clients. They're the choices that we're offering, but still giving them the benefits of being a larger organisation which can invest in the technology and the solutions that they need.
So it's scale game.
Absolutely.
Rod?
I think, I think what all of this has done is that it's forced, I guess, clarity of the strategy for InFocus, speaking purely for InFocus. So, what sort of a business are we? What are we good at? What are we not so good at? Where should we focus going forward? So it's probably a long way of saying yes to your question in that, are we doing things differently? The answer is yes. And I think, what we're doing differently is really making sure that we understand what it is that we're good at, and then we take that to market. I think in the past we may have been a bit diffuse with the range of products and services that we were offering, and so we've narrowed that down to where we think we have a true competitive advantage.
Dover is a bit different again. We have, I guess, a minimalist approach that's preferred by a lot of our advisors, where we limit our involvement with their practice to compliance and focus heavily and with a great deal of detail on their compliance, which works. For example, we have lawyers reviewing every statement of advice that's issued by any Dover advisor, something which is, I think, a great strategy, and the advisors greatly appreciate the feedback, the peer review, the second opinion on their work, and it's certainly led to a much, much higher level of compliance than you normally experience with an AFSL. But we have another bunch of advisors who realise that Dover's got other things inside it as well. We're actually one of Australia's biggest SMSF administrators, with 60 staff doing SMSF work in Vietnam. So a lot of our advisors have been able to create very successful SMSF practices using that as the back office. And that's something we encourage. Why do we encourage it? Well, I agree with all the earlier presenters. SMSF's a great thing to be in. It's a growth industry. It's not going to go away. It's just going to get a lot bigger. But there's something also more practical. It's because we can. We do have that expertise, so we allow our advisors to tap into it. And that's a general philosophy we have. If there's something we can provide you with at nil cost or low cost, we do. And the advisors really appreciate that.
But, there's this challenge though, isn't there, between the scale, which is, so true, and we've seen that, but equally too, this, we all know trying to be all things to all people just doesn't work, and inevitably you upset somebody. And sometimes narrowing that focus, as you spoke about, Rod, and just, when you were saying, Terry, about, this is how we approach compliance, and if you don't like it, then maybe you're not the right advisor for us. What do you think the attributes are for any advisor that's considering an independently owned dealer group? What are the common attributes amongst you all that you would see amongst advisors?
I would say quality of advice is the number one thing. So AAP is a very similar model to Dover, except it actually provides those same services free of charge to licensees, individual licensees. And we constantly get requests from the licensees to do further audits, to get further reviews, etc., etc. So it's quite the reverse. There's a demand for the services and they can't get enough of it. It's a fabulous proposition, and they've got the freedom to run their own business their own way, but they've still got the protection that they've got lawyers reviewing their material, and I think that's a quality of advice, whichever part of our business model, is a wonderful opportunity.
I might add the lawyers who do the reviewing are all in-house lawyers who are dedicated to the compliance function. I think the advisors are looking for something a little bit different, and they're looking for a certain freedom in their actions, and they enjoy the environment they're in. All our surveys show there's a high level of satisfaction and happiness. We occasionally lose an advisor, but I'm happy to say there's not too many.
Rod, do you think that that cultural or the common attributes is that an age or a time in the life cycle of an advisor's business evolution, or could it be at any stage? It's more it's a headspace matter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reluctant to sort of dive too deeply into the business, but what I will say is that what we spend a lot of time on when we're talking to people who might be contemplating changing dealer groups is values based.
Yeah.
So the numbers are the numbers to some extent. So let's talk about examples of emotional intelligence in action. Let's talk about your customer engagement. engagement processes and how they relate to customer satisfaction, might relate to customer satisfaction. Let's talk about, it sounds silly, but honesty and integrity and the approach that you take to the way that you're providing advice.
It's not silly.
And I think, going through that sort of process stimulates really good dialogue and you build really good rapport.
So is that then the opportunity, or what are the opportunities for the independent segment of the market?
I think one of the things that I've certainly noticed, and I'm sure it's with my peers here, is that when you're in the independent space, one of the things that the advisors really value is the opportunity to get together with their colleagues, the peer support, those friendships, the ability to share best practice between each other, and also that journey through life, whether it's the experiences, the ups and downs, how they're dealing with certain regulations. So it's not coming from a central point of view, it's actually coming from their peers who are either ahead of them or going through that curve and that learning curve. So I think that's one of the things that you really get when you're part of a family like Dover or PIS or AAP or whatever it may be.
Terry, what do you see the opportunities are for Dover?
For Dover?
Well, Dover as an independently owned dealer group, or for Rod, or for, for you and your peers?
For the advisors, I think it's just the freedom to run their practices the way they want to run their practices, with the only unconditional aspect being a high level of compliance. Then you've got a full range of clients. Some are very, very big, some are very, very small, some are very active, some are almost completely inactive. For Dover, it's in the foreseeable future, it's more of the same. We've got no intention to change the model in any way. It works. It doesn't work for everyone, but it works for a significant number of advisors, and it'll be business as usual, as you say.
Yeah, BAU. So, will Rod, have the opportunities broadened, changed for you, do you think?
I think it's not just for In Focus. I think the opportunities are broadened quite significantly. So I think as I was saying before, FOFA is forcing and will continue to force innovation to, I guess, strive to find that competitive advantage across the industry. And so I think that's a trend that's going to continue. I think the other thing that we find quite exciting is that the level of sophistication that's emerging or will emerge over time around wealth management, and particularly retail clients' understanding of their wealth. And you've heard me say this before, I liken it to what happened through the sort of 90s and early 2000s with stockbroking, where you had very large democratisation of the stockbroking market, which led to a large number of people owning shares directly in big companies that are demutualised. I think that's a trend that's going to take place in wealth as well. It'll take a bit longer, but it will take place. I think the other thing that's that I think is actually quite exciting is if you look at industry super funds and you look at a pool of clients that's 6 or 8 million clients potentially, depending on the numbers. Obviously a large number of those clients will receive advice from their industry super fund, but that pool is too large to just be serviced by financial planners that are inside that network. So there's opportunities there in terms of the game here is not for us to take market share off each other. The game is to grow the size of the pool so that we can all facilitate growth of our businesses.
And I'd say that for a large proportion of the people I've met so far, they deal with a certain segment of the market primarily, whether it's around risk or financial planning or around accounting. And it's about how do you become more of a financial manager across a range of products. And you mightn't necessarily be an expert in those, but you're able to provide those solutions through connections or peers or even through a central service. And I think that's a huge opportunity because people's needs are much broader than what I think we're solving at the moment. The accountancy space, I think with the limited advice isn't a solution, so I think many of them will actually have to move towards a full financial advisor licence. And then you've got more than 80% of the market of advisors currently being controlled by an institution, and that's an unnatural shape for effectively an independent space or for what is a people wanting, and it's a people business. They will come out of that. So whether it's 50%, I'm not sure is a reasonable balance, but when you're only 18% of the market, there's a lot of upside in there for us to grow, and that's just a matter of time, I think.
So, Rod, the terminology competitive advantage, that's hard on a Friday afternoon after a long week. Competitive advantage. What? I didn't have wine at lunch, by the way,
it's the jelly things.
I'm on Codral, so that would have been an absolute disaster. I would have been slurring. No, so the competitive advantage, is there one if you're an advisor licensed through an independent dealer group?
Well, I think that's where the innovation comes from. So, you know, I think if you look at technology, for example, and you look at the way that technology, I think, needs to change to be not about reporting on a vertical slice of a client within one platform, but perhaps reporting across a range of different asset holdings that client might have. I think that there are opportunities that are going to emerge. But to Terry's point before, I think, you know, he's 100% on the mark that if an advisor is independently minded, if they're a self-employed person who doesn't really enjoy that oversight, I guess, that comes with being with a bigger institution, there's always opportunity there.
I think for me it's about what independence provides you is being able to provide the best solutions for your customers. And if you're very in touch with your people, and I think everybody in this room would be, then it's really about how do you provide the best solution for them rather than offering the product that's in your kit bag is where I see the value of independence.
Okay, well, so we're out of time, so my finishing or concluding question to you all. I have a crystal ball here. Visualise. 5 years from now, any insights?
I would hope that Dover would be the same, except have a lot more compliance guys, because we maintain a ratio between compliance guys and advisors at about 60. And that would be wonderful if we could just get more compliance people on like that.
Yeah, good. Anyone want a compliance job? Talk to Terry afterwards. Yeah. Anyone else? No?
Oh, look, for me, I think we will see an independent space which is very strong. It will be successful. It will have to innovate. And it will also be financially strong. And I think that there's a lot of service providers out there at the moment that have been living on too small a margin and not being able to necessarily provide the support for advisors at all the various stages that they need to, whether that's entering the industry, whether it's exiting the industry, or when they have problems and let's say for whatever reason they do have a claim, that there is an organisation there that can support them. And I think that's what we need to be able to provide to our licensees and our advisors.
Okay.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think there's absolutely room in the marketplace for a strongly viable independent sector, and I think the opportunity for challenger brands in that sector is quite significant when you look at what, you know, some other examples, mortgage broking being one, where, you know, there's been some really successful businesses created in that space from a competitive sort of structure that's not dissimilar to what we're seeing.
Okay, well, I think, Vanessa, thanks for giving the independent dealer groups a voice today, and I think we'll wrap it up.